How do we change? Is there hope? Well, I certainly hope so. We've been waiting a long time for this. So who's heard of the term neuroplasticity? It's exactly the way it looks and sounds. Neuro meaning brain, plasticity meaning plastic, like malleable. You can remold it. It's a term probably a couple of decades old, and you probably never even heard of it. Has anybody heard of this term, neuroplasticity? Oh, wow, that's great. And you probably wouldn't have even heard of it 5 years ago. Neuroplasticity is the ability of our brain to change its structure and function, in particular by expanding or strengthening circuits that are used and by shrinking or weakening those that are not wanted. So why is all this important? Because we're here to talk about whether the mind has the capacity to change the neurocircuitry in your brain, whether your mind can change the distortions in your mind, your cognitive distortions, whether you can rewire your brain with intention. The leading edge concept of neuroplasticity. Ta-da, we're here. This is my favorite part of the lecture. So does your mind really have the capacity to rewire and actually change not only the structure, but the function of the brain? You know, the classical theory of the 20th century was that the adult brain is immutable, that it only grows until adolescence, and that your brain is compartmentalized, that a certain area is only doing for certain tasks, and if that certain compartment is damaged, then its function is diminished or lost. That theory is being overturned by overwhelming evidence and research of the neuroscientists and even the practitioners of psychology. A current example of neuroplasticity is our Congresswoman, Gabby Giffords, who got shot on January the 8th with a 9mm handgun. The bullet went clear through her head. It was point blank range. Just awful. About 5 weeks after the shooting, she started speaking again. Now, in the old days, we would say, oh, the brain is healing itself, like a cut on your hand and it's healing itself. Well, now they don't say that. They say now her brain is rewiring itself. Not much information is available, but we know that from her fairly rapid improvement in her speech, that her brain is actually borrowing nearby neurons and connecting and building new pathways, new bridge to her speech. So there are hundreds of cases of neuroplasticity, but lab cases with rats and mice and monkeys are really freaky. And so I chose a couple of real life examples here from Norman Doidge's book, The Brain That Changes Itself. And I want to talk about these two down here. Paul Bach-y-Rita is a pioneer of brain plasticity, and he's also a very interesting man, great personality. His interest in neuroplasticity began in 1959 when his father, 65-year-old father, had a stroke, which paralyzed half of his body, his face, his hand. He couldn't speak. The doctors told Paul and the family to take him home, that there was little or no hope of improvement. Now, George Bach-y-Rita, his brother, was a medical student at the time, and he didn't want to give up, and he had no experience in rehabilitation. So he decided to treat his father like a baby. Why not, he said. So he taught him to crawl first. They sat on the floor and played marble and catch. And after rigorous many hours of practice, he was eventually able to walk, talk, and even type. By the time Pedro was 68, 3 years after the stroke, he was actually teaching again at the City College of New York. And he died of a heart attack at the age of 75, mountain climbing in Bogota, Colombia. I think he even got married. But the story doesn't stop here. Paul brought his father's body back to the United States for an autopsy, and the findings were absolutely jaw-dropping. Pedro had a huge lesion in his brain that never healed, except that he recovered all of his bodily functions. The lesion was mainly in the brainstem, the part closest to the spinal cord. Other major areas in the cortex was also damaged that controlled movement. 97%, you heard me, 97% of the nerves that ran from the cerebral cortex to the spinal cord was damaged. catastrophic damage that caused the paralysis. This meant that the brain had to totally reorganize itself with the work that George did. Since there were no brain scans in the 60s, they had no idea how bad the damage was. After this discovery, Paul changed his career, went into neurology and rehabilitative medicine. Now, one of Paul Bach-y-Rita's amazing cases deals with the brain's ability to develop a compensating strategy for damaged areas, like Cheryl Schultz. At 39, Cheryl Schultz damaged her vestibular apparatus, which is her inner ear, by taking too much gentamicin, which is an antibiotic. So she lost her balance, she kept falling down, she lost her job, her life was in shambles. So in walks Dr. Paul Bach-y-Rita. He makes a helmet called an accelerometer. He attaches it to a computer, 144 electrodes into the helmet, and then connects it to Cheryl's tongue. And after some practice, when Cheryl keeps the tingling sensation in the middle of her tongue, she's able to balance. And with many hours of practice, she started to walk again. She now leads a normal life. Dr. Paul Bach-y-Rita says, you know, if you're driving to Milwaukee and the main bridge is out, you find the back roads through the farmlands to get to where you want to go. And as you do that over and over and over again, you're going to find faster and faster and shorter routes. Well, so does your brain. Your brain does the same thing. The brain has an absolutely amazing power to rewire itself with or without our deliberate intent. But with deliberate intent, we can change our cognitive distortions or learn to challenge them and alter the biological and physiological manifestations of a negative emotion. If the brain can overcome 97% neural damage, you can certainly change or alter your cognitive distortions. Da! Come on, we can do it. So how do we change? So how do we do that? Well, in order to go about changing or altering cognitive distortions, we have to first recognize that it's the thought that is the cause of our negative emotion. Thoughts happen really quickly and they're fleeting, but emotions linger on for seconds, minutes, hours, days, sometimes an entire lifetime. So, did I wake you up again? Good. By trapping our emotions and tracing them back to the thoughts that cause them, we can learn the source of our uneasiness, our dis-ease. Now I keep saying dis-ease because if we don't fix the dis-ease, it's going to turn into disease. Emotions can be our guidance system, steering us towards a healthier, happier, more meaningful life. That's the whole point here, isn't it? By learning to eliminate negative emotions in our lives, we improve the quality of our life.